Alright, hello, citizens of the Nigerverse. It is Nige here once again. Right off the bat, I seem to have fixed my camera issue for now. Turns out I was recording at too high of a resolution for OBS. Now, why it became a problem all of a sudden and my video got choppy, I am not entirely sure, but I have reduced that, so technically I'm recording at a bit of a lower quality, but hopefully it shouldn't be too bad for you guys. Let me know if it is. But nevertheless, despite that, had quite a bit going on. Excuse me, as the month is wrapping up, and unfortunately, I am kind of backlogged when it comes to videos, reviews, discussions such as this one, and stuff like that. So that's what we're going to be working on for next couple weeks, pretty much to wrap everything up in a nice little bow, nice little Christmas bow, if you will, as we move towards the end of the year. We still got some reviews, we got some other stuff that we're doing, so yeah. So stay tuned for that. I hope you guys are excited for that. But as for this is one I had been wanting to do for a little bit now, and considering where some things have been, and especially with hindsight being what it is, I feel like now is as good a time as any to talk about this. Oh, uh, in wrestling, over the years, we've seen several butterfly effects that seem to have lasting consequences that may seem small at first, but then have lasting effects, consequences, good and bad, over the years since then. And we've seen plenty of both in the wrestling industry, and we've seen a lot, especially nowadays, but especially back then as well. And we've seen some very big butterfly effects. So, what are some of the biggest butterfly effects that have happened in pro wrestling? Let's find out. Right off the bat, though, I have 10 listed here. We're gonna go through these again. Not really turning into a top 10 channel, but I am kind of experiencing with kind of top 10s and lists and stuff like that. It's not going to be the entire channel identity going forward, of course, but kind of just because stuff like this I think is interesting to kind of talk about. So kind of experimenting in a way. Hey, we're always experimenting here on the channel, all in the name of science. But also, this is one that definitely warrants a part two because 10 simply put, is not gonna cut it. Like this is not gonna be a one and done. Shout out to the Usos, but it's definitely worthy of a part two, maybe even a part three. But this is just ones that I picked out. Like, and maybe shortening this down to just 10, and it was he's had the suggestion of my good friend Steve, Plex TV. Go follow him. To keep it at 10, but there are a lot. So there's more than likely going to be a part two. It could be weeks or even months from now. But there definitely will be a part two. So stay tuned because there are a lot of these. But as for these ones, we're going to go through some of the biggest butterfly effects in pro wrestling history. So moments pretty much where one thing that seemed to happen, that seemed small, seemed inconsequential, seemed like not that big a deal, well, ends up being a major deal in the time since. So without further ado, let's get right into it. So the first one that we have is the curtain call. Now, the curtain call I had talked about on the channel not too long ago, maybe a couple months ago, on System Shock Radio, actually. So if you haven't already, go check out that episode. I forget exactly what episode that is. So I'm gonna because of that, just for the sake of not totally regurgitating everything I said in that video, because I don't want to completely just repeat myself all over again. And B, I do want you to check that out if you guys are interested. If not, that's fine. But if you are interested, I do want you to check that out. I'm scrolling so I can get the exact episode number where I talked about the curtain call. But to kind of give a brief summary of it, the curtain call, aka the Madison Square Garden incident, was where Shawn Michaels, Razor Ramon, Diesel, and Triple H all, after the match, got in the ring and hugged together because, of course, Diesel and Razor Ramon slash Kevin Nash and Scott Hall, respectively, were on their way to WCW. And so, because the Clique, who were, friends, of course, they wanted to embrace because, their friends were leaving them, but it was a moment that was caught on camera and a moment that got them in a lot of hot water. And it was 160 was the curtain call, episode 160 of System Shock Radio. So go check that out when you get a chance. But got them in a lot of hot water, got them in a lot of trouble, and it broke kayfabe. Now here's where the butterfly effect comes in, because out of everybody who potentially could have been punished, there was only one that could really be punished. If you can't punish Scott Hall and Kevin Nash because they're already gone, they're on their way to WCW. You can't punish Shawn Michaels because he is not only one of the top stars, like arguably the top guy, but also your WWE champion. So, it falls on poor Hunter Hearst Helmsley to take the brunt of the punishment. So, he's taken off TV for a little bit, if I'm not mistaken, and loses his King of the Ring win in 1996. And that win ultimately goes to Stone Cold Steve Austin. He cuts the Austin 316 promo. He becomes a megastar, cuts a legendary promo, really has his stock elevated when it comes to that, and the rest is history, not just for his career, but in the coming era, because as this was the end of the New Generation era, they were going into the Attitude Era, and Stone Cold Steve Austin would really become a major focal point of the Attitude Era, becoming arguably its biggest star. So a lot of it stemming from this moment of the curtain call here. What would the business look like if the MSG incident hadn't happened, or at the very least hadn't been recorded? Because I think that was the main problem, was that it was recorded. A photo was taken. This is back when kayfabe was so well kept and so well protected. Nowadays, it's not really as much because a lot more people know that wrestling is a work and everything. But people, they took the wrestling seriously back then, and a lot of them thought it was real. Just listen to some of the stories of people, heels getting attacked because people thought it was real. But this illusion breaking, this immersion breaking on a level like that, if that had not happened, what would it have looked like? What would the business have looked like had Triple H gone ahead and won King of the Ring that year, and Austin didn't cut the Austin 316 promo? What would the business have looked like? But the second one, like I said, we have some recent ones, and this one I think is a lot of people. A lot of people are pointing to nowadays, and really I think this is what ultimately gave me the kick in the butt necessary to finally want to really commit to doing this video. That being CM Punk's time in AEW. Now, on paper, CM Punk didn't spend long in AEW. Only about 2 years or so. He came in around August of 2021, and by ironically August of 2023, he was gone. But by the time we got to All in London, CM Punk was fired. He obviously got into the fight with Jack Perry, and so CM Punk was gone. He's back in WWE, back in their good graces on the roster and everything. But the thing that kind of makes it a butterfly effect for me and for a lot of people was a couple things. For starters, it brought CM Punk back into pro wrestling, not just in AEW, but also then heading into WWE. Yeah, heading back in WWE, mending that bridge and everything, and yeah. So August 2021 is when CM Punk came into AEW. So, CM Punk being involved in pro wrestling once again, having his run in AEW, getting him back into the wrestling business that's the one thing that really he caused the effects. And of course him coming back to WWE. He something that a lot of people didn't think would happen, and of course CM Punk has been and in some pretty major storylines since his return. He had, of course, the rivalry with Drew McIntyre, now looking like he's transitioning into his rivalry with Seth Rollins. Also, potentially, rivalry pending with Roman Reigns and everything. But also being able to do some stuff while in AEW. Of course, he had the feud with MJF. He had the feud with Jon Moxley. He didn't have the feud with the Elite that a lot of people wanted him to have, and that's part of the problem, which we'll get to. But yeah, so Punk being involved in pro wrestling again, and being able to do what he did and everything, and that I think is a major effect of CM Punk's return that a lot of people are discussing. But the other thing is that it seems in the wake of CM Punk's time there and all the controversy that went down while he was there, and then in his absence and with the interview, it seems to really have turned a lot of people's perception against AEW, and AEW, who seemingly he almost hasn't recovered. Like, a lot of things have gone wrong for them since CM Punk leaving, and with viewership being down, with now morale being down, with now talent being frustrated, and not even in every single talent that was directly connected to CM Punk, but with CM Punk kind of telling all about his time at AEW with the interview and everything, a lot of people have pointed to several aspects of his time in AEW, who and now relating that to how AEW truly is as a company. He especially now with the Ray Phoenix situation going down, and we're definitely talking about that tomorrow on System Shock Radio. But with that situation, a lot of people once again pointing to CM Punk's interview, him having to book his own surgery, nobody talking to him while he was injured. Or of course, there's Brawl Out, Brawl In, although I don't know if it really counts as Brawl In because he just choked Jack Perry a little bit. But hey, his words, not mine. But that period, as short as it was, definitely leading to some long-term effects, more specifically within AEW. Now, CM Punk in WWE, would WWE have been fine without CM Punk? Who's to really say? But especially with AEW, I mean, I'm not saying this as like being anti-AEW or anything like that, but just saying that a lot of people's reception to AEW has really been affected by by CM Punk and his time there and what went down. I don't know, especially getting into it with the Elite. Then with Jack Perry, who is also friends with the Elite and everything, and then now with Ray Phoenix, with Ricky Starks, that situation, and Danhausen even, and sorry, I'm trying to plug in my laptop up. So things like that, I think you can make the argument that it is a little bit of a butterfly effect, if not really a minor one in the grand scheme of things, especially with it being somewhat recent. We still haven't seen the ultimate long-term effect from it, but I think it's suffice to say, I would constitute that as somewhat of a butterfly effect. But speaking of leaving, in number 3 is Vince McMahon leaving WWE. Now, this one also taking place somewhat recently. He recently is 2022. Vince McMahon, obviously, he involved in some pretty heavy stuff with the lawsuit with the allegations of misconduct and everything, and him being forced to leave WWE, leave TKO, what have you, who and Triple H really stepping up into the reins, and it can be, it does leave a lot of people asking, what if Vince had stayed? What would things have looked like? What if Triple H hadn't taken over her and really the effects of Vince leaving, Triple H taking over in WWE has really been felt. WWE is on fire right now. They're doing really well. Not perfect. Not perfect. There are some things I do think that should be worked on, of course, but with WWE in such a great spot, with now Triple H having taken over, it does beg the question: what would it have looked like if either this that happened to Vince didn't happen, or if they just kind of swept it under the rug and let Vince stay? What would things have looked like? Would things have been better than they were at the time, or would things be worse? I'm sure a lot of people lean toward the latter, and I kind of agree. But it is interesting. What if Vince had stayed? Not saying Vince should have stayed, but what if he had stayed? But number 4 on the list is the first WrestleMania. So WrestleMania is, of course, it's the brainchild of Vince McMahon, but it's also one of the biggest entities in not just WWE but pro wrestling as a whole major event. Hence, major event, I should say, is WrestleMania. An idea that almost seemed like it wouldn't work. Beginning in 1985, of course, did WrestleMania, and it was kind of all or nothing. With the event itself of getting that celebrity involvement, and even celebrity was in the main event, that being Mr. T. He granted it was a tag team match, but still. But that first WrestleMania and how successful it was, leading to other WrestleManias and leading to some overall success for WWE. Not every WrestleMania was perfect. Not every WrestleMania was even good. There were plenty of duds. Let's be honest. But had we not had that first WrestleMania, had WWE/WF at the time not taking that risk and not decided to go for WrestleMania, what would the business as a whole have looked like? And again, admittedly, this is something that I'm kind of glossing over because there are a lot of these and we're already 17 minutes in, but this is something I definitely want to talk about and dedicate a video to in the future. So if you guys are interested in seeing that, let me know in the comments. But the next one is the Montreal Screwjob. Yep, this is a big one, and it's something that I, of course, have talked about on the channel before. Previously, I reviewed the actual match itself at Survivor Series 1997, where Vince McMahon screwed Bret Hart out of the WWE Championship, took it off him as Bret Hart was on his way to WCW, and Bret Hart took it. He took it well. He took it relatively well, and by well I mean by Dumbledore standards, leading to a lot of bad blood and animosity between Bret and Vince. That took them about 7 years to patch things up, and took them an extra 3 to patch things up with Shawn Michaels, of course. But a lot of people, it's a moment that a lot of people look at from very different perspectives, both good and bad. What would the business have looked like had Bret not been screwed by Vince McMahon, and had the title taken off of him in his home country of Canada, in Montreal? What would things have looked like? In terms of the lasting effects, of course, they did lean into it bringing up about 100 times over the next couple decades. Vince McMahon becoming a full-on on-screen character, being the main villain in a lot of cases in the Attitude Era, especially going against like Steve Austin, The Rock, Mankind, and all of that stemming from this moment. And of course, Bret doing his thing in WCW, or lack thereof in some cases. But But it does beg the question. Yeah, it's pretty messed up. Like it's a pretty bad situation. There's a reason why it took so long to really bury the hatchet from that, because that's pretty bad. But it does beg the question: what would things have looked like if Vince didn't do that to Brett? If Brett was allowed to drop the title before going to WCW, if this whole controversy had been stirred up and WWE capitalizing on that said controversy, what would things have looked like were that the case? It does make you wonder. Yeah, it's pretty messed up, but it does also make you wonder. And with those effects, with the lasting effects of it, is it a net positive or a net negative? Is that moment? And really, that's a subject for debate, and something that people have debated for a while. Well, because I do think it's an interesting debate to an extent to really talk about that. But next up is. Let's take a swig of my water there. But next up is Batista being in Evolution instead of Mark Jindrak, and then Batista leaving in 2014. So, this I think is another one, especially the latter one, that really helped fuel my desire to want to do this video, because a lot of people are talking about this being another kind of mini butterfly effect here, but also because these both involve Batista and in a way both involve Evolution, I decided I would combine them for this video. But yes, so Mark Jindrak was originally supposed to be the fourth man in Evolution. In fact, if you go on YouTube, you're able to find and of course after finishing this video. But anyway, hey, if you do go on YouTube though, you can find footage of Mark Jindrak with the rest of Evolution. It's actually pretty interesting. And I forget exactly why Batista was swapped out for Mark Jindrak. And kind of like a similar theme of them wanting a muscle for Evolution, but Batista being in Mark Jindrak's spot, and Batista going on to be a major star. Mark Jindrak, sadly, not really attaining that level of superstardom that Batista had gotten, at least in WWE. But had things stayed the same, had Mark Jindrak still been in Evolution, what would things have looked like? Not just for him, but for Batista. Would Mark Jindrak then be a multiple-time world champion in WWE, multiple-time WWE champion? But of course, Batista would use Evolution to really launch his superstardom, becoming a major star, or not just within Evolution, but later on as well. And this, I believe, is like really fresh off him being Deacon Batista alongside Reverend Devon. But Batista being in that spot allowed him to become a legend. But what if it was Mark Jindrak instead? And really, it's not the last time we'll see a member being replaced here. But also then Batista leaving in 2014. Batista came back for a little bit in 2014, and kind of a spoiler, we're gonna get into a little more of that as we move down the list here. But Batista came back for a little bit, late 2013 to about early 2014. He came back for a spell. Hell, started off well at first, and then Daniel Bryan got over, and so Batista pretty much was forced to turn heel and not quite fully get in that world title feud with Randy Orton, and instead became kind of a three-way because the people wanted Daniel Bryan in that spot, and Daniel Bryan did end up being in that spot. But then from there, her Evolution would be reformed without Ric Flair here, which admittedly was kind of weird. I believe this is when Ric Flair was still in TNA, if I'm not mistaken. But nevertheless, as Batista and Evolution had reformed, they feuded with the Shield for a little bit before Batista left. But what if Batista had stayed in the Authority? What if Batista had stayed in WWE? What if there was no need for Plan B of Seth Rollins turning on the Shield? And I think that part's really the butterfly effect part, is Seth Rollins breaking up the Shield, because it really launched Seth's solo career. It launched Roman's solo career. To an extent, launched Dean Ambrose's solo career as well, although that that would fully be realized once he got to AEW. Which not to say he didn't have success in WWE, because he did. He became multiple-time tag team champion, and of course WWE champion as well, but and nowhere near to the level of Roman and or Seth. Uh, but uh, but had Batista not left, what would they have done with the Shield? Like, had the Shield carried on? Admittedly, the Shield part we can kind of talk about later on. It's his own butterfly effect, and that I'll probably save for part 2. But yeah, so what if Batista had stayed? What if he had not waved bye bye to WWE and to Evolution? But the next one, and we're up to number 7 here. And speaking of which, is literally the very next one is the Yes Movement. So yes, no pun intended there, but Daniel Bryan at this point had gotten over, or ironically stemming from a moment that should have buried him when he lost to Sheamus in 18 seconds at WrestleMania 28. But by that time, Dan Bryan's popularity continued to rise and rise. He was part of Team Hell No. He started doing the yes chants and the subsequent no chant, and really getting over with the fans. And to the point where WWE pretty much had to push him, which they did not want to do. They did not see Dan Bryan as an A player. They saw him, of course, as the B plus player, but nay, said the people, to the point where every kind of tactic they use to try to, I guess, as discredit. I don't know if that's necessarily the word I want to use, but pretty much to downplay Dan Bryan, kind of move away from the main event scene, was not received well. Dan Bryan did win the WWE World Heavyweight Championship this is when they had the 2 titles. He won them at SummerSlam 2013. Or actually, no, the titles were not unified. Yeah, this was just the WWE Championship. I forgot the titles wouldn't be unified until later, but nevertheless, Dan Bryan won them from John Cena, cashed in on by Randy Orton, but that's the yes chants are still going. And Daniel Bryan and label B plus player, the Authority, was formed. He wasn't in the 2014 Royal Rumble, which subsequently the fans were not too happy about, to put it lightly. They tried to put Dan Bryan in the Wyatt family, but it was just too much. They pretty much forced Daniel Bryan into that main event picture, leading to him winning the WWE World Heavyweight Championship this time he did hold both the titles at WrestleMania 30. Dan Bryan did get his happy ending, kind of, because he was in like a lot of pain. He was pretty banged up. He pulled double duty in the night he fought Triple H in the opener, and then battled for the WWE World Championship against Batista and Randy Orton later on. So yeah, Dan Bryan was definitely kind of banged up, but had either the support not been so strong for Daniel Bryan, or had WWE put their fingers in their ears and said la 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 la, la at Daniel Bryan and his push, which is what they wanted to do at first, but eventually became too overwhelming to ignore. Or what would things have looked like? Would Dan Bryan have gotten that push, that time in the sun? What if Randy Orton and Batista had went off without a hitch? It probably wouldn't have been the most interesting thing. No disrespect to either man, but it did lead to a very feel-good moment. And it's crazy to think that WWE almost made the same mistake 10 years later. But admittedly, that's another butterfly effect for part 2. So a lot of ground we're gonna cover in part 2. I told you there was a lot. But number 8 on the list here is the pandemic. Yes. You may or may not have seen this coming, but 2020 was a very weird time. I remember, 2020. I remember the emotions around that time. I was in college at the time, and I just remember that feeling of uncertainty as things began to shut down, as it became pandemic, as we got the COVID-19 cases here in the U.S. It's just that feeling of uncertainty, not nobody really knowing what was next. But you know who else was really uncertain and didn't know what was next? WWE, because a lot had to be shifted around. Obviously, because of COVID restrictions, they couldn't have crowds anymore, or so WWE had to make the best of this bad situation, and leading to the first ever WrestleMania with nobody in attendance, nobody in the crowd uh, at the performance center. Her was as WrestleMania with nobody there. A lot of matches that were supposed to take place at WrestleMania didn't happen, such as Roman Reigns versus Goldberg. That didn't happen, and because, as of course, Roman was taking time off to because he was as considered at risk because of his leukemia and everything, and and obviously he came back in a major way by SummerSlam of that year. But them having Money in the Bank on at the WWE headquarters in Stamford, which admittedly, even though COVID is it's kind of on the back foot and everything, hey, maybe I'm alone here. That's something I'd like to see them kind of try again, because it was kind of a fun. It was kind of a fun idea. The match was kind of bonkers. It was kind of weird. It did have its funny moments, but I thought it was kind of. I thought it was kind of a cool idea. Maybe fine tune a couple things, but that's something I'd like to see them try again. Maybe I'm alone on that, yeah. So there was that. Them and the lack of crowd and everything caused them to kind of get a little experimental and kind of play around with some ideas. We got some cinematic matches during the ordeal. We got the Boneyard match between Undertaker and AJ Styles. We got the Firefly Funhouse match between John Cena and Bray Wyatt. Excuse me, the Fiend Bray Wyatt. Both that took place on nights 1 and 2 of WrestleMania. We got the Swamp Fight match. I wish we didn't, but we did. Between Braun Strowman and Bray Wyatt. But we also got the Thunderdome. With like the wall of like with like the screens of people in their homes and everything, kind of making up a digital in a way audience, in which that was it was kind of weird, but them essentially trying to make do. But it does beg the question: what would things have looked like if the pandemic didn't happen? If we were allowed to get crowds like normal? If WrestleMania 36 went off without a hitch? If we got all these scheduled matches, would have been better? Would have been worse? There's a lot of this is speculation, because obviously I don't have concrete answers. Nobody does. That's because these are moments that did happen, but we're kind of talking about if they didn't, or the lasting effects of them happening. But that I think is a big one. Like, what if we were allowed to have crowds in 2020? What if we didn't have to get rid of crowds for a little bit? What would things have looked like? Would certain things have been better? Would certain things not have been as good? But like I said, it definitely was a weird time, especially in the early days where there was no crowd. Even before, like, they had the kind of makeshift crowd form of like the performance center recruits and everything, and kind of making up a makeshift crowd. Before then, where there was nobody, it was very weird times. But that's of course, crowds are back at this point in time, and we'll have to see if that hat gets taken away from us again. But nevertheless, next up, second to last one we have for this video is Roman Reigns joining the Shield instead of Chris Hero. Yes, that's right. Chris Hero was supposed to be in the Shield. Well, now CM Punk kind of came up with the idea of like the Shield, like having like a gang of mercenaries protecting him as WWE champion. Guys, this was while he was WWE champion. This was in the middle of his 434-day WWE title reign, and so when Roman Reigns assembled this team for not Roman Reigns, when CM Punk, I should say, assembled this team for the Shield, he originally wanted Dean Ambrose, slash Jon Moxley, Seth Rollins, and Chris Hero. Oh yeah, as Chris Hero, I believe he was in NXT at this time as Cassius Ohno. But that was the loadout he wanted for the Shield. But Chris Hero, that idea got shot down. Instead, they put in their guy, that being Roman Reigns. Now the reason this kind of a butterfly effect is because Roman Reigns arguably he ended up being arguably the biggest star of the three when it came to the Shield. It took some time to get there. It definitely wasn't an easy road. There was some growing pains for a little while before he became the tribal chief and became beloved by so many. But it does beg the question: what if CM Punk had gotten his way? Hey, what if Chris Hero was able to be in the position that Roman Reigns was in? Would things have worked out better or worse for not just him and not just Roman Reigns, but WWE as a whole? What would Roman Reigns be up to now? Would Chris Hero be the top guy? Would he be the tribal chief? Who knows? But it does beg the question: how would the Shield have looked with Chris Hero? Now, admittedly, the dynamic, and maybe this is because I'm not super duper familiar with Chris Hero. I'm not gonna pretend that I am, but Roman being added to the Shield, I do get it. Them kind of having like a muscle and everything. I do think the dynamic ended up working out for the most part because the Shield was awesome, but yes, it does beg the question: what if Chris Hero had been in that position instead of Roman Reigns? But the last one that we have, this is a big one, and it really all these ones to an extent, and could kind of be traced back to this one, that being WF going global. So apparently, when Vince McMahon Jr., that being Vince K. McMahon, brought it from his father, Vincent J. McMahon, and apparently his father tried to advise Vince not to go global, to keep it territorial, keep it national within the United States. But Vince McMahon treated that at pretty much like he treats a lot of his other promises and everything. That just asked Bret Hart, because he was promised quite a bit before that went down. And really, now that I think about it, there is a lot that I missed with the Montreal Screwjob. Maybe I'll do a follow up. But Vince did decide to go global with WWE, and because he decided to go global, WWE he became the household name that it is today. For better or for worse, as being in several different countries, being recognized by several different countries, being well established in several different companies, countries, I should say, not just the United States, but being this global phenomenon, this global enterprise. Had Vince followed his father's advice, I believe Vince even did make the promise that he wouldn't do it, just to turn around and do so anyway, and him even saying that if Vince McMahon Sr. knew what I was going to do with WWE, he wouldn't have sold it to me. It does beg the question: what would it have looked like had WWE not gone global? Had Vince heeded his father's advice? We probably wouldn't have the WWE we would have today. Hey, so kind of a necessary evil situation, perhaps. But it is interesting to think about. Like, what if WWE hadn't become what it is today? This big global enterprise, essentially. Yeah, this big global phenomenon. And like I said, just about everything else stems from that, because most of not all this is after WWE goes global and becomes this very household name, which is for the most part still going strong to this day. Hasn't always been perfect, but what would it have looked like if it had been national? Would it even still be around? Would I even be a fan of it if it had been nationally? Well, if WWE hadn't been global, hadn't been so huge, would people like me ultimately have become a fan of it? But just like the rest, that is all speculation. And in a way, these are all speculations. But I think they are interesting to think about, these butterfly effects, because it does make you wonder. It makes your mind kind of explore. What if things were different? What if things were vastly different? But And of course, like I said, these are far from the only ones, so definitely stay tuned for part 2. But in the meantime, thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. This one definitely was kind of a long one, but I hope you enjoyed, and I hope you stayed for the long haul. If you did, please do me a favor, like, comment, subscribe, share with your friends, and turn on post notifications. Every time I upload a video, so you can see it as soon as it drops. And let me know in the comments below your thoughts on any of these butterfly effects, and do you guys want me to do a part 2? But in the meantime, thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you guys later. Peace.